Fine. Suddenly, Shang Qingying's resounded. From this moment onwards, all the students and forces of the academy will obey you. You can do as you please. Shang Qingying felt quite helpless as she spoke these words, because she knew how crazy it would get once the forces of the academy obeyed Yang Ye's orders. However, she had no choice. She didn't doubt that Yang Yi would definitely take the others and leave if she refused, and if they refused to leave with him, then he would leave on his own. What would Yang Ye's departure represent? It didn't represent that it would be impossible to defend the city without Yang Yi. However, while their backup from the ancient sword school was on the way, all of those experts would only acknowledge Yang Yi. Would they come to help the academy if it wasn't for Yang Yi? Besides that, while Yang Yi was quite insane, his strength and ability were beyond doubt. Moreover, his presence wasn't just able to deter the wolf army. It could even deter the powers within the city that tried to rebel. Regardless of whether she admitted it or not, besides Shangguan Yunhai, the younger generation of the academy couldn't compare in reputation to Yang Yi. Moreover, Yang Yi had caused chaos to arise in the city, coupled with the fact that he possessed the support of the entire outer court. His departure would definitely cause the entire outer court to follow him. Once that happened, who would deal with the terrible state of things here in the academy? Who could possibly resolve it? If Shangguan Yunhai left his closed-door cultivation, then perhaps he could. However, even if Shangguan Yunhai did emerge from his closed-door cultivation, he would absolutely not have the time or chance to pay any attention to the city. Because Shangguan Yunhai was being watched by the forces of Welkin Wolf Mountain Range, and they would definitely dispatch experts to stop him. So, Yang Yi absolutely couldn't be allowed to leave now. A ray of sword energy slashed down from above the city walls, and countless wolves which intended to enter the city were instantly slashed into two. At the same time, the city gates closed under Yang Ye's orders. Yang Yi sheathed his sword, turned around to look at Shang Qingying, and asked, "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I am." Yang Yi said, "What I'm about to do might exceed your expectations, but I hope that you stand on my side, or you do nothing at all. All right?" She replied, "All right." Yang Yi nodded. He was about to speak when a group of people suddenly appeared in the distance. It should actually be called a crowd. The leader of the group was a middle-aged man who held a saber in his hand, and his appearance was quite similar to the middle-aged man who was nailed to the wall. There were 3,000 spear-wielding cultivators in black armor following behind him, and a huge crowd of almost 100,000 were following behind those 3,000 cultivators. Moreover, most of the people in the crowd were carrying demon beasts, and there were over 10,000 demon beasts there. They were the demon beasts that Yang Yi had let into the city. Shang Qingying said, "That's the Su clan's patriarch, Su Xingyun." Yang Yi replied, "Send the word for all the experts of the academy and the city's army at the monarch realm and above to come here." Shang Qingying asked, "Then what about the city?" Yang Yi answered, "It's fine. The wolves won't be able to break through the city's defensive formations for some time." Shang Qingying glanced at Yang Yi, and then she flicked repeatedly, causing numerous ripples to shoot through space. It didn't take long for the experts at the monarch realm and above who were guarding all 4 city gates to rush over here. Yang Yi was quite surprised because he noticed that there were actually over 50,000 monarch realm experts. Besides that, there were around 100 half-saints, and there were even over a dozen high-rank half-saints. But it made sense because the academy was a platinum rank power at any rate. If it didn't even have tens of thousands of monarch realm experts, then could it even be considered to be a platinum rank power? Moreover, this was absolutely not all the academy's forces. Not to mention anything else. Just those 7 saints proved everything. Ocean of Cloud City could be considered as half a base to the academy. But it wasn't the Ocean of Clouds Academy's true main base of operations. So, even if it intended to defend the city, it wouldn't defend the city to the end. So, as far as Yang Yi was concerned, all of these experts before him and even the students of the secret court from before didn't represent the true strength of the academy. From this moment onwards, all the students, elders, guardians, and soldiers of the city are to obey Instructor Ye's commands. No one is allowed to disobey him. Shang Qingying's voice resounded. A wisp of bewilderment flashed through their eyes, but those experts still nodded in the end. Yang Yi glanced at Shang Qingying. He was quite curious about her identity. After all, if she was only an ordinary inner court instructor, then how could she make all of them obey her orders? Because many of them had might greater status and strength than her, like those high-rank half-saints. Yang Yi didn't have the mood to think too much about it because Su Xingyun and the others had arrived before the city walls. Su Xingyun glanced at the middle-aged man who was nailed to the wall, and then his gaze descended onto Yang Yi. I presume you're the new instructor of the academy, Yi Yang. Very good. The young really are great. Yang Yi said, I'd expected you to attack right away. How could I dare to do so? Su Xingyun chuckled. You slaughtered hundreds of thousands of wolves on your own, and you even slaughtered the entire secret court by yourself. I'm afraid that besides the 5 top geniuses of the prefecture, no one else can rival your strength. I naturally possess some strength, but I'm afraid I would only be able to withstand a few blows from you at most. I haven't come here today to take revenge for my uncle or that useless younger brother of mine. I've merely come here today to seek justice for those who've been killed by the demon beasts. You're here to seek justice? Yang Yi was slightly stunned, and then he grinned. I'm really curious about what you have to say. Go on. Su Xingyun's face sank. Yi Yang, do you know how many children lost their parents because you opened the city gates? Do you know how many parents lost their children? Do you know how many wives lost their husbands or husbands lost their wives? When he spoke up to this point, Su Xingyun pointed at Yang Yi and spoke furiously. Do you know how many families were destroyed because of you? Yang Yi shrugged. I didn't want that to happen. There were too many demon beasts, yet all of you refused to come and help defend the city. I wasn't able to defend the city, so I had no choice but to let the demon beasts in. Alas, to be honest, I really understand your feelings. However, I wasn't the one who killed your loved ones. It was the wolves from Welkin Wolf Mountain Range. If you intend to seek justice for them, then you should go look for those wolves. They are right outside the gates. Do you want me to open the gates for all of you? Su Xingyun spoke in a low voice. The beasts of the Welkin Wolf clan naturally deserve death. But why did you let them into the city? Yang Yi replied. There were too many demon beasts yet too few of us. We weren't able to stop them. Why couldn't all of you stop them? Su Xingyun blurted these words out in a moment of anger, and then his expression changed slightly once he finished speaking, because he knew that he'd said something wrong. Sure enough, the faces of the students and experts on the academy side had instantly turned gloomy upon hearing him, and their gazes towards him had become hostile. Even Shang Qingying had an extremely gloomy expression on her face. Su Xingyun wanted to save the situation, but Yang Yi waved his hand and said, Don't waste your breath. I don't have the time for this nonsense. As he spoke, Yang Yi pointed at the crowd behind Su Xingyun and said, My greatest flaw is being too soft-hearted. So don't say that I didn't give all of you a chance. If you are willing to change your ways, then I'll just act as if nothing happened. If you don't surrender now, then you won't have another chance to even if you beg for it. Yi Yang, don't tell me you intend to kill all of us? Su Xingyun laughed coldly. I admit that your strength is heaven-defying indeed, but so what? So long as my Su clan gives the order, then I'll be able to gather at least 1 million people from the city. Can you even kill that many? Exactly. Yang, no matter how strong you are, can you kill so many of us? Even if you can, would you dare? Would you? Yi Yang, you arbitrarily allowed the demon beasts to enter the city and slaughter the city's residents. Such actions are equivalent to betrayal towards the city. Just see how many people in the city have died because of you. If you have a heart, then you should kill yourself to atone for your crimes. Kill Yi Yang. Kill Yi Yang. The crowd behind Su Xingyun howled in unison. Kill them. Spare no one. Yang Yi spoke abruptly. Everyone here was slightly stunned, including Su Xingyun and the others. At this moment, they felt like their ears weren't working properly. Yang Yi glanced coldly at the forces of the academy and said, I told you to kill them. Are all of you deaf? This time, all of them heard him clearly. How Shuaibua and the others didn't hesitate to charge towards Su Xingyun's group. As for the remaining experts, They gazed at Shang Qingying instead. Shang Qingying clenched her fists tightly, and they were trembling. A moment of silence ensued before she suddenly roared furiously, "Kill! Kill them! Spare no one! Kill!" At this moment, they didn't hesitate to charge at Su Xingyun and the others. "You! All of you! Yi Yang! Are you mad?" Su Xingyun was horrified. How could he have imagined that Yang Yi would really dare to kill them? After all, there were over 100,000 standing behind him, and he could summon even more people. Especially when the Saint Realm experts of the Academy were locked in combat with the expert of Welkin Wolf Mountain Range. Even the Dean of the Academy wouldn't have dared to touch his Su clan. However, he was wrong. The Su clan's strength wasn't bad, and it even possessed huge numbers and quite an imposing aura. However, when compared to the experts of the Academy, no, it couldn't be compared to the Academy's experts at all. It was a slaughter, a complete and utter slaughter. Even though Yang Ye's side didn't possess such huge numbers as Su Xingyun did, the strength possessed by the experts on Yang Ye's side was utterly superior to Su Xingyun's forces, especially when Yang Yi was constantly hunting the supreme experts on Su Xingyun's side. So, the battle was one-sided since it began. "Miss Shang, my Su clan is a loyal supporter of the Academy. Aren't you afraid that such actions would disappoint everyone?" Su Xingyun shouted from amidst the crowd. Shang Qingying closed her eyes slightly and paid no attention to him. "We surrender. We surrender. We surrender. Instructor Shang, we're willing to surrender. We're willing to surrender. Please spare us. I'm really willing to surrender. Stop chasing me." Oh! Countless people started to surrender, but the slaughter was still going on. "Miss Shang, my Su clan is willing to defend the city with all its might." A voice suddenly resounded. Shang Qingying opened her eyes and waved her hand, and then the experts from the Academy immediately stopped attacking, because the person who spoke those words was Su Xingyun. Shang Qingying looked at Yang Yi. A ray of sword energy flashed, and then the heads of a few hundred flew into the air. Yang Yi glanced at the experts of the Academy and said, "I told all of you to spare no one." Shang Qingying spoke in a slightly trembling voice. "They've surrendered." She just finished speaking when Yang Yi suddenly appeared in front of her, and then a sword pressed against the center of her forehead. A moment later, traces of blood started flowing down the tip of the sword, and her absolutely beautiful face was instantly covered in blood. 10 breaths of time. If they aren't dead by then she'll take their place. Yang Ye's icy cold voice resounded. The experts of the Academy were absolutely shocked when they witnessed this scene, and besides Hao Shuaibua and the other outer court students, the other experts of the Academy glared furiously at Yang Yi. Even Su Xingyun and the others were completely stunned. Moreover, terror immediately arose in the depths of their hearts once they recovered from their shock. What sort of madman is that outer court instructor? One of the old men from the Academy spoke furiously. "Yi Yang, how dare you? Do you know who she is? You'll definitely die if you dare to touch her." 9. Yang Yi paid no attention to the old man and started to count instead. "Yi Yang, do you realize?" The old man hadn't even been able to finish speaking when Yang Ye's voice resounded once more. 8. The old man was furious. He intended to say something, but another old man by his side immediately grabbed his arm, and then that old man glanced at those experts of the Academy who were glaring at Yang Yi. "Do as he said. Kill them. Spare no one." Even though he didn't know Yang Yi well, he knew that Yang Yi was definitely someone who dared to do as he'd said. After all, what else was he not capable of after he'd even dared to slaughter the entire secret court? Yi Yang, you, how ruthless of you. Su Xingyun's furious voice resounded incessantly. Meanwhile, more and more people were rushing over from afar. Su Xingyun and the others were delighted upon noticing those people, because those people were the backup that he'd called for. The Academy is annihilating traitors. Stay away if you don't want to die. One of the high-rank half-saints from the Academy glanced coldly at the crowd that was gathering here, and they immediately stopped moving when they heard the old man. The Su clan really was extremely strong in the city, and no one dared to offend it. However, they feared the academy more. After all, it was a platinum rank sect while the Su clan was only a gold rank clan. When conflict arose between a gold rank clan and a platinum rank sect, even a fool would know which side to stand on. All the people who arrived here moved over 1 kilometer back. But they didn't flee. They just watched as the experts of the academy slaughtered Su Xingyun and the others. It didn't take long for those 10 breaths of time to be up. The corpses of 100,000 laid in piles throughout the area below the city walls, and the stench of blood permeated every corner of the area. It was utterly nauseating. "Are you satisfied now?" Shang Qingying suddenly said. "Are you satisfied after killing so many?" Yang Yi paid no attention to her. He walked towards Su Xingyun, and he didn't waste his breath on Su Xingyun. He just flicked a sword forward and nailed Su Xingyun to the city wall. After that, Yang Yi flashed up onto the city walls and said, "Shuaibua, open the gates and let the demon beasts in. Wushuang, notify the entire city to come and defend the city if they want to live. The Ocean of Clouds Academy will live and die with anyone who comes to defend the city. As for those who refuse to come, their fate will be of no concern to us. If someone dares to seize this opportunity to cause trouble, then the Su clan's fate is the consequence." Yang Yi suddenly said, "Keep the Su clan's patriarch alive." No one dared to refuse his orders, of course. It didn't take long for the city gates to be opened, and then over 5,000 demon beasts were let into the city. At the same time, Yang Ye's announcement swept through the city under Yu Wushuang's efforts. Meanwhile, the atmosphere on the city walls was quite tense. Because besides Hao Shuaibua and the others, all the other experts of the academy were looking at Yang Yi with hostile gazes, and some even had killing intent in their eyes. Shang Qingying only had to give the order, and they wouldn't hesitate to charge at Yang Yi. Obviously, Yang Ye's actions had truly infuriated them. 100,000 are dead just like that. Shang Qingying walked over to Yang Yi. At this moment, her face was still covered in blood. They surrendered. If we stopped, then it would be equivalent to obtaining the help of 100,000. I know that Su Xingyun infuriated you, and that's why you wanted to kill him. Yi Yang, can you not act impulsively? Yang Yi paid no attention to her, and he just looked towards the mountain range in the distance. The mountains in the distance stretched out until the end of his vision. All of the mountains there towered into the clouds, and they were like dragons that rested in the distance. The mountain range was naturally Welkin Wolf Mountain Range, and it was the lair of the Welkin Wolf clan. Yang Yi remained silent for a long time as he gazed at the mountain range, and no one knew what he was thinking. Shang Qingying wanted to say something else. However, many people suddenly ran over from afar. The expressions of Hao Shuaibua and the others immediately changed upon noticing these people, and they immediately became vigilant. "We're willing to defend the city with our brothers from the Ocean of Clouds Academy. My Yun clan is willing to live and die with the Academy. My Chun clan is willing to live and die with the Academy. My Feng clan is willing to live and die with the Academy." Hao Shuaibua and the others were stunned upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Yu Wushuang stepped forward and said, "Welcome, friends. My academy is willing to live and die with all of you. However, let me warn you in advance. Since you've come here to defend the city, then you must obey the rules we've set. If anyone dares to feign compliance or seize the opportunity to play tricks, then the Su clan is the best example of the consequences." All of them looked towards the city walls when they heard her. There were 2 people nailed there, and their expressions changed upon seeing those 2 people. Because those 2 people were naturally not unfamiliar faces to them. "I never expected the Su clan to actually be destroyed. Looks like the academy is serious this time. Fortunately, I didn't listen to Su Xingyun, otherwise my Yun clan would have probably ceased to exist by now." The bodies of the brothers from the Su clan and the corpses of 100,000 people possessed such a deterring force that many who originally had ill intent had immediately discarded their ill intent, especially those who'd thought about joining just to seek protection. The cruel reality before them told them that the academy was truly furious now, and it wasn't joking. In the beginning, only a few thousand came, But it didn't take long for more and more to rush to the northern gates. In less than 15 minutes of time, an entire 100,000 people had arrived, and more were still arriving incessantly. They naturally hadn't come here to cause trouble. They were all here to declare their willingness to live and die with the Academy. Besides the Academy, the other residents of the city and the clans within the city weren't able to resist the demon beasts. Even if they stood a fighting chance if they were to join forces, they would still suffer severe losses in the end. So, the only way to survive was to grab onto the protection of the Academy. As for defending the city, while it was a dangerous task, the experts of the Academy would be with them at least. But if they didn't come to defend the city, then the Academy would disregard their fate once the demon beasts entered the city. An hour later, almost 1 million people had converged here. These people mostly possessed weak cultivations, and most of them were at the King Realm or Spirit Realm. However, there were quite a few at the Monarch Realm and Exalt Realm as well. As for low-rank half-saints, mid-rank half-saints, and high-rank half-saints, there were some as well. Xianxia and the others were quite stunned as they watched more and more rush towards the northern gates. After all, the Academy had called for the help of the experts of the city, and some had come, but only very few. Moreover, they would even flee if they encountered danger. Even though Ocean of Cloud City was a subordinate city to the Ocean of Clouds Academy, it had never exercised any management over the city. Besides that, because the Academy had always followed the principle of not interfering in the battle of the world, anyone could come to Ocean of Cloud City while the residents of the city were completely unaffiliated to the Academy. They had no need to obey the orders of the Academy. So, the Academy could only call for their help, and the Academy couldn't order them to help. As for the results of calling for their help, are you unable to figure out why they've suddenly changed their attitudes and are so willing to help defend the city? Yu Wushuang suddenly walked over to Shang Qingying's side. Shang Qingying nodded in response. Do you know why Yang Yi refused to spare the Su Clan's group just now? Yu Wushuang didn't explain but asked another question instead. Shang Qingying spoke in a low voice. Because he can't tolerate any insult. Yu Wushuang chuckled. You're wrong. So very wrong. Yang Yi isn't someone to tolerate that, but he's an extremely proud person as well. He doesn't take the Su clan seriously at all. The reason he killed Su Xingyun and the others wasn't because Su Xingyun scolded him and he sought to gain revenge. It was because he had to annihilate the Su clan, which was the first to step forward and defy him. Because only then can we deter the entire city. Perhaps he would have only killed Su Xingyun and not slaughter the rest if it were at any other ordinary time, but we don't have much time anymore. When she spoke up to this point, Yu Wushuang pointed at the crowd below and said, if we weren't able to converge them soon, then they would only be a disorderly crowd when the city is breached and the wolf army enters, and the only fate that awaits them while they are without any leadership is death. However, if we can converge them together and organize them, then it would be a completely different story. Shang Qingying said. We could accomplish the same thing without killing those people just now. No, you're wrong again. Yu Wushuang continued. Their intention to help us defend the city wasn't sincere at all. The only reason they surrendered was because we're stronger than them, and they were powerless to resist. Once we enter into battle with the demon beasts, then many amongst them, and especially the Su clan, would be very likely to turn on us. At that time, we'll be facing enemies on both fronts. Most importantly, the only way to deter those people and powers who intend to cause trouble was to kill them. We could choose to do it slowly if it was at any other ordinary time, but we don't have the time now. Shang Qingying suddenly asked, what would happen if those people weren't killed? Yu Wushuang chuckled. The city would remain in a state of chaos, and it would be utterly chaotic. It wouldn't change anything even if Yang Yi continued to let more demon beasts into the city, because they wouldn't realize how serious the situation is, and they wouldn't realize how ruthless and determined our academy is. But once we killed those fellows, they would realize that we would continue letting the demon beasts in if they refused to help defend the city, and if they dared to express displeasure or look for trouble with us. Then the fate of the Su clan and those 100,000 people would be the consequences that they faced. Shang Qingying took a deep breath and said, so, if they want to survive, then they have no choice but to join forces with us. Right? Yu Wushuang nodded. Shang Qingying said, "Why didn't he explain all of that to me?" "Because he doesn't treat you as one of his own. He either disregards or attacks those he doesn't consider to be one of his own." Yu Wushuang continues, "Unfortunately, you've suffered both of that. He hasn't just disregarded you. He has even attacked you." Shang Qingying was speechless. Bang! Suddenly, the city walls crumbled before their eyes. The city had been breached, and the army of millions of wolves was right before them. It was less than 300 m away. It was an army of a few million wolves, and many of them were at the Exalt realm and Monarch realm. Coupled with the huge size of the wolves, the terrifying pressure which assaulted them caused many cultivators within the city to start trembling. So, many had actually started to prepare to flee. A ray of light flashed, and then a few dozen cultivators who turned around and fled were instantly annihilated. Forces of the Academy, hear my command. Show no mercy to anyone who dares to flee before battle. Yang Ye's ghastly voice rumbled like a thunderclap, and it caused many who intended to flee to instantly stop on the spot, because the experts of the Academy were standing in the surroundings. However, there were some who were still unable to endure the terrifying pressure from the army and turned around to flee. However, all of them were annihilated without exception, and there even was a high-rank half-saint amongst them. After a few thousand lost their lives, no one else here dared to try and flee again. Perhaps they still wanted to flee, but at least no one dared to try and flee anymore. If they stayed behind to fight alongside the experts of the Academy, then perhaps they would have a chance at survival. But if they fled, then they would definitely die. Unless someone took the lead. But would anyone dare to do that? Moreover, after they calmed down, they understood that if the army of wolves were to charge into the city now and the experts of the Academy retreated, then what would they do? They would be powerless to resist the army of wolves without the help of the Academy. Perhaps the high-rank half-saints amongst them could escape, but what about the rest below that realm of cultivation? So, when they realized that, many of them had immediately discarded their intentions to flee. The army didn't charge towards Yang Yi and the others upon breaching the city, and there was a bewildered expression in the eyes of many wolves at the front of the army. Obviously, they hadn't expected that over 1 million humans would be waiting for them behind the city walls. Moreover, more and more humans were joining the group. Yang Yi shot up into the sky and looked down at the crowd. "See? That's the army of wolves. Besides this area, the entire city is surrounded by the wolf army. Flee? No, we don't have anywhere to escape to. The only way to survive is to kill. Kill until they are forced back." When he spoke up to this point, a ferocious expression appeared on Yang Ye's face. "Let me be frank in advance. If you dare to flee, then I'll order the experts of the Academy to leave the city. I always keep my word." Their expressions changed upon hearing Yang Yi, and then they turned pale. They could imagine the fate that awaited them if the experts of the Academy left. "If anyone dares to flee, then I'll be the first to kill him. We're willing to live and die with the Academy. Instructor Yi, the city is in a situation of life and death, so you absolutely can't act on impulse. Don't worry, my MO clan will be the first to attack anyone who dares to flee in the face of battle. We'll annihilate anyone who dares to flee." Countless people here made their stands clear as they were very much afraid that Yang Yi would act impulsively and order the experts of the Academy to leave the city. Especially the clans of the city, their foundation was laid in the city. So once the city was breached, then even if they could escape, they would lose that foundation which they'd built up in the city. So, their clans would definitely suffer a decline. Thus, they absolutely couldn't allow the city to be breached. Shang Qingying suddenly said, "They weren't like that in the past." Yu Wushuang laughed coldly. "Only the wicked can deal with the wicked. The Academy was too tolerant in the past. Let me explain it like this. If Ocean of Cloud City was a subordinate of the Tao Order, then would they dare to refuse the Tao Order's command to leave the city and fight? In my opinion, the Academy shouldn't maintain the rule of not participating in the conflicts of the mortal world. Since it can't stay completely detached from the matters of the mortal world, then it has no choice but to merge with the world. Only then can the Academy avoid falling into such an embarrassing situation again. Shang Qingying remained silent. Meanwhile, the army of wolves suddenly moved around 1 kilometer back, and then they split apart at the center. It didn't take long for a gold-robed man to appear within their fields of vision. The man was riding a huge wolf, and Xianxia's eyes instantly narrowed when he saw the huge wolf, because it was a high-rank half-saint. The gold-robed man rode the huge wolf to the city walls, and then his gaze descended onto a part of the wall which was still intact. There was a person and a wolf nailed there. It was naturally the yellow-robed man from Sky Divine Hall and the white wolf. Both of them were still alive, but they were on the verge of death. A long time passed before the gold-robed man withdrew his gaze, and then he gazed at Yang Yi and said, "It was a mistake in my Welkin Wolf clan's judgment. We never expected that the Academy had a genius like you or that it concealed your existence so well, and we never imagined that you would actually be able to converge all of these cowardly humans from the city. I truly never expected all of this. Human, what's your name?" The outer court instructor of Ocean of Clouds Academy, Yi Yang. Yang Yi flashed over and stopped just 300 m away from the gold-robed man. "Let me guess, you should be one of the Welkin Wolf Demon King's sons, right?" The gold-robed man replied, "I'm Lan Zhao's eldest brother." The expressions of Shang Qingying and some high-rank half-saints of the Academy changed drastically upon hearing him. Shang Qingying immediately flashed over to Yang Ye's side and spoke with a solemn expression on her face. "He's the strongest existence below the Saint Realm on Welkin Wolf Mountain Range, and he's called the Young Welkin Wolf King. You absolutely must not be careless while fighting him." Meanwhile, the gold-robed man pointed at the yellow-robed man who was nailed to the wall and asked, "Do you know who he is?" Yang Yi replied, "He seems to have said that he's Lu Qianxiao's younger brother." The gold-robed man said, "You knew yet still dared to do that?" Yang Yi chuckled, "I think that you should be worried about your own younger brother instead. He can only blame his own lack of strength." The gold-robed man spoke indifferently, "Of course, I'll avenge him." As soon as the gold-robed man finished speaking, countless howls resounded incessantly from the surroundings, and then countless wolves dashed out from the mountain range. The expressions on the faces of the crowd behind Yang Yi changed once more when they witnessed this scene, because there were truly too many wolves. The gold-robed man said, "We've wasted too much time on Ocean of Cloud City. Now we don't want to waste any more time. So, let's decide the outcome right now." More and more wolves were gathering behind the gold-robed man, and the entire ground was quaking incessantly. In less than 15 minutes, the army outside the northern gates had doubled from 3 million to around 6 million, and it was still growing. As for Yang Ye's side, there were only around 3 million cultivators. The gap was truly too huge. The gold-robed man said, "Human, you seem to have a little too few people on your side. Is that so?" Yang Yi laughed coldly and said, "Deactivate the formation. Open the gates." Shang Qingying and the others were slightly stunned and gazed at Yang Yi with puzzled expressions. Yang Yi glanced coldly at Shang Qingying and the others, and then he said, "I said deactivate the formation and open the gates. Didn't you hear me?" Shang Qingying wanted to say something, but Yu Wushuang immediately led some experts over to take action. It didn't take long for all the formations around the city to be deactivated, and all the city gates were opened. Besides the northern gate, the army of wolves charged into the city from all 3 other gates. The slaughter began. Shrill cries resounded throughout the city. "What exactly are you trying to do?" Shang Qingying walked over to Yang Yi and was practically shouting. Yang Yi paid no attention to her. He gazed at the wolf army instead. At this moment, the army of wolves was almost 8 million strong, and the terrifying aura they emanated was something that even his sword intent found difficult to block. Shang Qingying intended to continue speaking, but Yu Wushuang suddenly walked over to her and said, "Instructor Shang, it's all right to be stupid, but you shouldn't step forward and humiliate yourself." Shang Qingying was furious. "You!" Yu Wushuang pointed towards the crowd behind them and said, "Look at that." Shang Qingying turned around and looked over upon hearing that, and she saw that the crowd behind them was increasing at an alarming rate. The group of 3 million had already transformed into a group of 5 million now. Shang Qingying was puzzled. What? Yu Wushuang explained. There are around 100 million people in the city, yet only around 3 million came to defend the city. Why? Because many were being hopeful. They felt that there were others who charged to the front lines, so they didn't have to bother about defending the city. Now we've deactivated the Grand Formation and opened the gates. In other words, everyone will have to face the army of wolves, and no one can escape them. So, if they want to survive, then their only choice would be to join our group. Do you understand now? Shang Qingying said. But many will die. Yu Wushuang shook her head. It's better than causing the entire city to be slaughtered. Besides that, Instructor Shang, if you don't have the ability to keep us alive, then can you please shut your mouth? And can you stop questioning Yang Yi in public? Don't blame me for being frank. I'm doing this for your sake. Have you not realized it? Yang Yi has wanted to kill you on many occasions. If it wasn't for your unique status in the Academy and the fact that your death would be a blow to the morale of the Academy's forces, you would have died a long time ago. Shang Qingying was speechless. Meanwhile, more and more people were gathering behind Yang Yi. It didn't take long for them to grow into a group that was bigger than the army of wolves from Welkin Wolf Mountain Range, and there were almost 10 million cultivators behind him. After all, only the northern gates was safe throughout the city. So, how could the residents of the city not rush madly towards the northern gates? The gold-robed man gazed at Yang Yi for a long time, and then he said, "Human, you're really bold and resolute. Unfortunately, it's all in vain, because so long as you die, then all of these fellows will collapse in an instant." As soon as the gold-robed man finished speaking, his figure leaped up into the air, and then a huge golden wolf that blotted out the sky appeared in the air outside the northern gates. "Take this." The huge wolf spoke the human tongue, and then a huge golden claw descended from the sky. A terrifying pressure rained down from the huge claw, and it caused almost 1 million of the people behind Yang Yi to be pressed flat on the ground. As for the barrier formed from Yang Ye's third-level heaven rank sword intent, it was instantly blasted into nothingness by the pressure. It carried the aura of the heavens and the earth. Just this attack alone allowed Yang Yi to determine that the gold-robed man's strength was far superior to Lan Xiao, because it carried the aura of the heavens and the earth. What was the aura of the heavens and the earth? It was an act of utilizing the energy of the heavens and the earth to form a powerful aura and pressure. It was something that could only be accomplished with the strength of a cultivator at the Saint Realm or by utilizing some special techniques, like a divine rank technique or some other type of special divine technique. However, the gold-robed man had merely swung his claw, yet he'd formed a terrifying pressure that was comparable to the aura of the heavens and the earth. It was created from physical strength alone. Lan Zhao's physical body was extremely strong, but it hadn't arrived at such a level. Yang Yi didn't use his sword intent to resist it, because while third-level heaven rank sword intent was formidable, it hadn't transcended worldly limits. So, it was utterly incapable of resisting the gold-robed man's aura. Yang Yi held the ancient sheath tightly in his left hand, and he held the hilt of his sword in his right hand. The profound energy within him surged into the ancient sheath. At the same time, his third-level heaven rank slaughter intent and third-level heaven rank sword intent surged madly into the sword sheath in his grasp. The ancient sheath in Yang Ye's grasp started to tremble while rays of dazzling light surged out from within it. In an instant, it covered an area of a few hundred meters around Yang Yi. Yang Yi couldn't afford to lose this battle, because once he did, then everyone behind him would definitely flee. At that time, unless a saint were to step forward, otherwise the city would be unable to escape annihilation. Slash! Yang Ye's voice suddenly resounded, and then a brilliant ray of sword energy shot into the sky while accompanied by a sword howl. It was an attack that carried 25 overlapped heaven rens. Actually, Yang Yi was only able to execute 20 overlapped heaven rens before this, but he'd advanced to the high rank of the monarch realm, so his strength had increased greatly. Thus, he could overlap 25 heaven rens now. How strong was 25 overlapped heaven rens? Under the enhancement provided by the critical strike technique, 3rd level heaven rank sword intent, and 3rd level heaven rank slaughter intent, the sword energy could be said to be the strongest attack he'd ever executed with Heaven Rend besides the true Heaven Rend he'd executed that day. Space was weak like a piece of paper before that ray of sword energy, and it completely collapsed before it. Numerous long spatial rifts followed behind the sword energy that shot into the air and appeared high above in the high. Xianxia's sword energy smashed against the huge claw before the eyes of everyone here. A moment of silence ensued. Bang! The huge claw shook violently while countless strands of sword energy shot out from the sky, and they instantly blotted out the sky. 2 types of heaven rank intent. Not bad. Unfortunately, it's not enough. The gold-robed man's voice resounded in the sky, and then a huge explosion resounded right after it as a beam of golden light slashed down from the sky and instantly arrived above Xianxia. Xianxia swiftly drew his sword and slashed once more. A beam of sword energy shot into the sky and collided with the beam of golden light. As soon as they smashed against each other, they instantly dispersed in the sky, and countless waves of energy swept towards the surroundings. This scene horrified all the spectators, but it didn't take long for a ray of sword energy to obliterate the waves of energy. Meanwhile, the gold-robed man had arrived in the air above Xianxia. This time, he wasn't in his original form, and he'd taken human form instead. Take this. As soon as he spoke, the gold-robed man leaned back while he clenched his right fist tightly, and then he smashed it swiftly towards Xianxia. However, Xianxia suddenly vanished on the spot, and he was in the air above the gold-robed man when he appeared once more. After that, the Herculean sword smashed down towards the gold-robed man's head. Bang! The gold-robed man's figure was pushed down slightly, but Xianxia was blasted flying instead. The army in the city was shocked. Shang Qingying, Yu Wushuang, and the others immediately revealed grim expressions on their faces, because Xianxia absolutely couldn't die or lose. Once he died, then the army in the city would collapse in an instant. He couldn't even lose as well, because if he lost, then fear towards the wolf army would arise in the hearts of everyone who stood here. If they had such fear in their hearts, then there was no need to even fight the wolf army because they'd already lost the battle. As he stood on the ground, Xianxia took a glance at his hands. At this moment, his hands had actually split apart, and a small portion of the Herculean sword had sunken down. Huff! Xianxia took a deep breath, and then he raised his head to look at the gold-robed man in the distance. Needless to say, your body is extremely strong, the gold-robed man said. Your speed is extremely swift. It's much faster than mine, as expected of the energy of the laws. Xianxia suddenly said, It would definitely be very cool if you were my mount. Your mount? The gold-robed man was slightly stunned, and then he said, There are many people in this world who are capable of making me willingly become their mount. However, it definitely doesn't include you. I know you have some trump cards, but you can give it a try. Ow! Meanwhile, a howl suddenly resounded through the sky. The gold-robed man frowned a little when he heard the howl, and the army of wolves behind him actually laid flat on the ground. It was the Welkin Wolf Demon King. From this moment onwards, everyone in the city should obey Yi Yang's orders. No one is allowed to disobey him. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded from the sky. It was the Dean of the Ocean of Clouds Academy. Shang Qingying's heart shook when she heard this. With what the Dean had just said, everyone in the city and everyone from the academy, including her, would have to obey Xianxia's orders from this moment onwards. If Xianxia holds absolute authority, I wonder if it'll be a blessing or calamity to the academy and the city. Xianxia suddenly sheathed his sword, turned around, gazed at the ocean of people behind him and said, Tell me, do all of you want to die? All of them were stunned, and then they hurriedly shook their heads. None of them wanted to die, of course. Xianxia pointed his sword at the gold-robed man and said, See that? That's the Welkin Wolf clan of Welkin Wolf Mountain Range. They intend to slaughter all of us. Are all of you willing to be slaughtered by them? All of them shook their heads once more. Xianxia roared, Then what do all of you think we should do? Kill them. Kill all of them. Kill! Kill! Countless people started shouting. OM! A sword howl resounded as Yang Yi pointed the Herculean sword at the wolf army in the distance and said, "The city has been occupied by the wolf army. The wolf army is both ahead and behind us. Everyone, if you want to live, then kill." As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Ye's figure flashed and transformed into a ray of light that charged towards the gold-robed man. As for the others behind him, their blood instantly started boiling when they saw him charge forward, and all of them charged forward behind him. Yu Wushuang spoke abruptly. Humans are extremely selfish, so they are usually never united. However, when they face a moment of life and death, and especially when they have no way out of the situation, then they would very wisely abandon the selfishness in their hearts and choose to join forces. Shang Qingying, who stood by Yu Wushuang's side, asked, "Is that the true reason why Yang Yi deactivated the formation and opened the gates?" Yu Wushuang nodded and said, "Humans have a very strong desire to live, and they'll transform into devils in order to survive. At this moment, while we can't truly organize all of them to attack in an orderly manner like an army, their desire to live would make them on par with ordinary armies. Of course, the precondition is that they have someone to lead them and give them hope that they'll be able to survive." "I understand now." As soon as she finished speaking these words, Shang Qingying charged off along with the others. The gold-robed man and the wolf army had clearly not expected that Yang Yi and the others would actually attack first. As far as they were concerned, the humans should be on the defensive when facing such a huge wolf army. In Yang Ye's opinion, they absolutely couldn't be on the defensive. Why? Because once the wolf army was allowed to attack first, then the charge of an army of a few million wolves would very likely cause the human army to collapse in an instant. After all, the human army was gathered at the last minute, and they hadn't received any proper training. So, they were utterly incapable of resisting the impact of a charge from the wolf army. The only way to resolve that was to attack first and allow them to gather their confidence. Only then could he prevent them from instantly collapsing upon facing the wolf army. Ow! A howl resounded, and it didn't take long for the wolf army to act. The millions of wolves started to charge forward in Yang Ye's direction, and the ground quaked before them. As the wolves started their charge, the imposing aura they emanated instantly suppressed the aura that Yang Ye's side had built up during their charge. OM! Suddenly, a crescent of sword energy flashed swiftly and instantly shot into the army of wolves. A few thousand wolves at the front of the charge were instantly annihilated. Kill! Yang Yi stomped his right foot against the ground, and his figure transformed into a ray of light that shot towards the gold-robed man. The confidence of the army behind Yang Yi instantly multiplied when they saw Yang Yi kill thousands of wolves with a swing of his sword, and all of their eyes turned crimson red as they charged forward. It didn't take long for the army of wolves and the human army to collide with each other. At the same time, Yang Yi and the gold-robed man entered into battle again. Yang Yi started a violent attack against the gold-robed man with the assistance of the laws of speed. Unfortunately, his sword couldn't break through the gold-robed man's defenses no matter what. Conversely, he would definitely suffer a heavy injury if he suffered a single blow from the gold-robed man. The gold-robed man's physical defenses were much stronger than Lan Chao, and it was more than just a little bit stronger. End the battle quickly. Suddenly, Yu Wushuang's voice resounded. Yang Ye's figure flashed a few hundred meters back in the sky, and then he glanced at the ground below. His heart shook when he witnessed the scene below, and his face instantly turned gloomy, because the human army was in a very bad situation. Even though the size of the human army surpassed the wolf army, their quality was far inferior to the wolf army, especially when many humans were utterly incapable of piercing the defenses of the wolf army. So, the human army could be said to be suffering terrible losses. The gold-robed man said, "I told you, you won't be able to defend the city." Yang Yi suddenly said, "Do you remember what I said earlier?" The gold-robed man frowned a little. "What?" Yang Yi replied, "Be my mount." A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of the golden-robed man's mouth. "Why don't you give it a try?" "So be it." As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yi vanished on the spot. However, his figure was blasted flying a moment later. The human army was horrified by this scene. Xianxia's dead? Such a thought had appeared in the minds of everyone here. Fortunately, Xianxia forcefully stopped his figure in midair, and it allowed them to instantly heave sighs of relief. Shang Qingying heaved a huge sigh of relief as well. At this moment, Xianxia could be considered as the backbone of the entire army, and if he died, then she had no doubt that the morale of the army would crash in an instant. At that time, their army would be slaughtered without the ability to fight back. So, Xianxia absolutely couldn't suffer any mishaps right now. The battle merely stopped for an instant, and it didn't take long for the humans and wolves to start fighting once more. At this moment, all of them were filled with the intent to kill, and they were charging madly at the wolf army. While the human army was qualitatively inferior to the wolf army, it had a huge advantage in terms of size because the human cultivators in the city were still rushing over incessantly. So, they had around 15 million cultivators in their army right now. Moreover, people were still rushing over here, with quantity compensating for quality. While the human army was still in a disadvantaged position, it was able to fight the wolf army at least. The battle between Xianxia and the gold-robed man in midair had stopped. At this moment, Xianxia could be said to be in quite a bad state. His chest, which had recovered earlier, had sunk down once more, and blood was flowing down incessantly from the corner of his mouth. As for the gold-robed man who stood before Xianxia, he was in quite a bad state as well. There was a bright red mark on his throat, and it was bleeding incessantly as well. Besides that, there was a long injury on the man's chest, and it was so deep that even his internal organs could be seen. The gold-robed man stretched out his hand to touch his throat, and he gazed at the blood on his hand before he looked at Xianxia. Quasi-void rank sword intent. I truly underestimated you. Now I understand why you were able to kill my third brother. Not to mention his defenses, even mine can't withstand quasi-void rank sword intent. His death really wasn't because of luck. Xianxia glanced at the gold-robed man and spoke inwardly. What a pity. Earlier, he'd suddenly utilized his quasi-void rank sword intent with the hopes that he could kill the gold-robed man with one blow. Unfortunately, he failed. The gold-robed man's senses in combat were too strong, and he'd smashed his fist against Xianxia's stomach and blasted Xianxia flying when Xianxia's sword had just pierced through his skin. If it wasn't for his physical defenses, then just that punch would have been sufficient to kill him. Bang! Meanwhile, a raw of golden light suddenly surged out from within the gold-robed man. As soon as it moved a few centimeters away from the gold-robed man, it instantly formed an extremely thin sheer robe around him. It covered him completely, and it was even to the extent that his eyes were covered in a thin layer of golden film. Could be said to be completely airtight. It's called the plasma robe, and it's my innate divine ability, the gold-robed man said. With it around me, I think that besides wasting time, wasting our breaths right now is completely meaningless. So, cut the crap and just fight me. Xianxia suddenly interrupted the gold-robed man. As soon as he finished speaking, he'd arrived in front of the gold-robed man. At the same time, countless rays of sword energy enveloped the gold-robed man. At this moment, Xianxia didn't conceal his quasi-void rank sword intent because if he still held back while fighting the gold-robed man, then he would just suffer a beating until he died. After all, his sword couldn't pierce through the gold-robed man's defenses without being supported by quasi-void rank sword intent. If he couldn't pierce through his opponent's defenses, then he could only suffer a beating. The sky was blotted out by sword energy and rumbling resounded incessantly from there. Yu Wushuang stared fixedly at the sky from somewhere on the ground, and her eyes were filled with worry. Even though the two armies were fighting intensely on the ground below, besides the saints who were fighting high above in the sky, only the battle between Xianxia and the gold-robed man could decide the outcome of the collision between the two armies. Regardless of whether it was the wolf army or the human army, it would instantly collapse without a leader. If Xianxia won, then the human army would definitely be able to crush the wolf army under his leadership. Conversely, if Xianxia lost, then the wolf army would definitely be able to crush and slaughter all the humans here under the gold-robed man's lead. The battle between Yang Yi and the gold-robed man could be considered as the true key to deciding the outcome of this battle between the human and wolf armies. Domain. Suddenly, an astonished voice resounded from the sky. It was the gold-robed man's voice, and the sky suddenly fell silent once his voice resounded. Even though there were countless rays of sword energy flashing there, they didn't make even a shred of noise. The silence lasted for around 10 breaths of time, and then the sword energy in the sky started to disperse slowly. It didn't take long for a person to appear within their fields of vision. All the humans cheered in unison upon witnessing this scene. As for the wolf army, they started to howl with sorrow, because it was Yang Yi. However, Yang Yi didn't seem too well right now. His entire body was covered in blood while floods streamed out incessantly from the corner of his mouth. Most importantly, his hair had actually turned snow white. Of course, they didn't have the mood to pay attention to that. All they knew was that Yang Yi had won. Human. I, the Welkin Wolf Demon King, swear on my inner demons that I'm willing to perish if I'm unable to kill you. Suddenly, a furious howl resounded from the sky, and it even caused ripples to surge incessantly throughout the sky. It was an extremely shocking sight. As soon as the Welkin Wolf Demon King finished speaking, the wolf army started to turn around and retreat. Should we seize this opportunity to pursue them? Shang Qingying flashed over to Yang Ye's side, and her voice carried undisguised excitement. Yu Wushuang appeared by Yang Ye's side, and she glanced at Shang Qingying while she spoke in an icy cold tone. Go ahead if you aren't afraid of death. What? Shang Qingying was puzzled. Our morale is at an all-time high. So long as Yang Yi leads us, we'll definitely be able to strike a heavy blow to the wolves. Yu Wushuang glanced at Shang Qingying as if she was looking at an idiot, and then she paid no further attention to Shang Qingying. She walked over to Yang Ye's side, and a trace of pain flashed through her eyes as she gazed at Yang Yi, who had his eyes closed while blood was still flowing out of the corner of his mouth. She spoke softly. Are you all right? Shang Qingying's heart shook when she heard Yu Wushuang. At this moment, her mind had finally cleared up, and she looked at Yang Yi. At this moment, she finally understood why Yu Wushuang said that. Because Yang Yi was clearly heavily injured, and he couldn't lead them into battle at all. Yang Yi opened his eyes slowly and rolled his eyes. He just opened his mouth slightly, but a strand of blood flowed out in a moment, and he quickly closed his mouth again. Yu Wushuang and Shang Qingying were shocked. Yu Wushuang wanted to support him, but Yang Yi stopped her with a glance. She was slightly stunned by this, and then she understood what he meant. At this moment, there were countless eyes looking at him from below. If they were to find out that Yang Yi was heavily injured, then it would definitely be a blow to their morale and might even cause some with ill intent to get ready to cause trouble. So, Yang Yi had to act like he was completely fine. In that way, he could maintain their morale, increase their confidence, and deter the wolf army and others who had malicious intent. Around 10 minutes passed before Yang Yi slowly descended to the ground, and Yu Wushuang and Shang Qingying were by his side. He stood there for a moment, and then he started walking towards the city. Yi Yang! Yi Yang! Yi Yang! Countless people started cheering. How grand was it to see over 10 million cheering in unison. Yang Yi smiled and nodded as he walked towards the city. But actually, he wanted to cry. In the end, he had relied on the sword domain and quasi-void rank sword intent to suppress the gold-robed man and attain victory in the battle. However, he'd paid a huge price for that. The first price he paid was his lifespan. Because of the gap in their realms of cultivation, his sword domain couldn't fully suppress the gold-robed man. Thus, he'd suffered severe backlash from the sword domain's inability to endure the gold-robed man's strength. That backlash caused his lifespan to have less than half a year remaining. If he couldn't attain the half-saint realm in 6 months, then he would be buried in the ground. Besides that, he could be said to be covered in injuries from the gold-robed man's final retaliation. In any case, his internal organs had split apart, and even numerous bones within him were broken. It could be said that the severity of the injuries he suffered right now was merely inferior to the injuries he suffered from executing the true form of Heavenrend. However, he had to act like he was fine right now. Fortunately, while he'd paid a heavy price, He'd obtained some gains as well, and it was in the form of the gold-robed man's corpse. Yu Wushuang had wanted to support Yang Ye's figure on many occasions while she walked by his side, but she'd forced herself not to. As for Shang Qingying, she wasn't aware of Yang Ye's current state, and she even frequently stopped Yang Yi and introduced the elders and guardians of the academy to him. This had made the corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitch countless times. It didn't take long for Shang Qingying to finally notice that something was off after Yu Wushuang kept glaring at her with a murderous glow, and she didn't dare continue introducing others to Yang Yi. Right when they were about to enter the city, a man who held a spear suddenly appeared at the entrance of the city. Yang Yi instantly revealed a vigilant expression when he saw the man, because he sensed killing intent from the man. As for Shang Qingying, she was delighted and said, "Chen Fan, you've emerged from your closed-door cultivation?" The man paid no attention to her, and he just gazed at Yang Yi and said, "You kill all the members of my secret court?" Shang Qingying's expression changed slightly. She wanted to say something, but the man waved his hand. "It should be you. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Since you've slaughtered everyone from my secret court, I'll slaughter everyone from your outer court." As soon as he finished speaking, he swiftly stabbed his spear towards Yang Yi. Star Piercer! The space around the man's spear instantly shattered apart. At the same time, the tip of his spear pierced through space and instantly arrived before Yang Yi. Yang Ye's expression changed slightly. Not to mention mustering some strength, even moving was difficult for him in his current state. Of course, he wouldn't just wait for death to arrive. He was just about to forcefully circulate the profound energy within him when he suddenly felt his hand being grabbed, and then a huge amount of force came from it. Yang Yi instantly took a few steps back while a small and delicate figure stood in front of him. It was Yu Wushuang. Bang! The spear smashed against her body. Her eyes immediately opened wide while a few mouthfuls of blood sprayed from between her lips. After that, the enormous force carried by the spear blasted her into Yang Ye's arms before blasting Yang Yi a few hundred meters away with her. Wushuang! Yu Wujiao's face instantly turned ghastly pale when she witnessed this scene, and she charged towards Yang Yi and Yu Wushuang like a mad woman. Meanwhile, Feng Wuchao and the others recovered from their shock. All the outer court students were furious, and they charged at Gu Qianfan. It wasn't just Feng Wuchao and the others. Many other cultivators here were beyond furious, and they charged forward with Feng Wuchao's group. Gu Qianfan's eyes narrowed when he saw them charge towards him, and a wisp of ruthlessness flashed through his eyes. He was about to attack when Shang Qingying suddenly stood between Gu Qianfan and the others, and she spoke angrily, "All of you stop!" The cultivators in the surroundings immediately stopped. After all, Shang Qingying was from the academy, and they didn't dare go against her in public. However, Feng Wuchao and the others didn't stop, and they continued they charged towards Gu Qianfan. "Just die!" A vicious expression flashed through Gu Qianfan's eyes, and his spear swept towards Feng Wuchao and the others. An arc of light swept out, and it instantly killed the outer court students at the front of the group, while Feng Wuchao, Li Maozhen, and a few others who were comparatively stronger were still blasted flying from the impact and slammed against the ground. All the outer court students were defeated by a single attack. Everyone here was astounded. What a bunch of trash! A wisp of disdain flashed through Gu Qianfan's eyes, and he was about to launch another attack. However, Shang Qingying appeared in front of him and gazed at him with a gloomy expression on her face. "Gu Qianfan, what are you doing?" "What am I doing?" He laughed coldly. "Instructor Shang, everyone from my secret court was killed by Yi Yang. Yet you're asking me what I'm doing here? Isn't that truly laughable?" Shang Qingying took a deep breath and said, "Gu Qianfan, I understand how you feel, but there are no buts." Gu Qianfan interrupted her and said, "An eye for an eye. I'm going to make him, and the entire outer court pay with their lives." As he spoke, Gu Qianfan's figure flashed towards Yang Yi. "Stop him!" Shang Qingying roared furiously as she charged towards him. As for the other experts of the academy, they immediately charged towards Gu Qianfan when they heard her. Meanwhile, Yang Yi had exerted a huge amount of strength to finally crawl up from the ground, and then he immediately glanced at the surroundings. In the end, his gaze descended onto a small pit in the ground that wasn't too far away from him. Yang Yi was stunned for a moment, and then he slapped both his palms against the ground and propelled himself over to the edge of that small pit. There was a young girl curled up within the pit, and it was Yu Wushuang, of course. Yang Ye's face instantly turned quite ghastly pale when he saw her. Because she wasn't breathing. She's dead? Yang Yi was quite stunned, and he slumped down to the ground before staring blankly at the delicate figure in the pit. She's dead. Just like that. She died for me? Yang Ye's white hair actually started to slowly turn red. It wasn't just his hair which had started to turn red. Even his eyes were swiftly turning red. In just 2 breaths of time, his hair had turned completely blood red while his eyes were crimson, and they seemed like they were made of blood. A stream of tears started to drip down slowly from Yang Ye's eyes. They were blood red as well. Strands of red light started to surge out incessantly from within Yang Yi, and it formed a blood-red pillar of light that shot through the sky. Meanwhile, the aura of blood suffused the surroundings, and it was accompanied by a monstrous intent to kill. The people in an area of 3 kilometers around him were horrified because many had actually started to lose their mind, and their eyes had turned crimson red while they emanated the intent to kill as well. Instructor Yi, stop that quickly. Many cultivators with comparatively stronger minds and strengths hurriedly shouted loudly because many in the surroundings had actually started to attack each other. However, Yang Yi didn't just refuse to stop. The red light he emanated grew stronger and stronger. It pierced through the sky and even dyed the sky blood red in color. At the same time, the intent to kill was growing stronger and stronger, and many half-saints were actually affected by it. They started to lose their minds as well, and some comparatively weaker half-saints had even started to attack others. It was complete chaos. Meanwhile, Shang Qingying and the others had stopped moving, and they gazed at Yang Yi with astonishment. At this moment, Yang Ye's entire body was crimson red, while countless strands of red light and slaughter intent were surging explosively from within him. Not only did the red light cover the entire sky, it even filled an area of 3 kilometers around him, causing even the space in that area to turn blood red. As for the slaughter intent he emanated, it was strong to the point that even Shang Qingying and the others were affected. This is quasi-void rank slaughter intent. Shang Qingying gazed at Yang Yi with astonishment. She hadn't imagined that he would actually attain quasi-void rank sword intent right now. The effect of every single type of intent was actually different. For example, sword intent could strengthen sword energy, and it could suppress and restrain others as well. As for slaughter intent, it could affect the minds of others and cause them to lose their minds to become machines of slaughter. Moreover, they would even be controlled by the slaughter intent. So, unless there was no intent to kill within them, those who had even a trace of killing intent and possessed a weak mind and strength would definitely fall under its control. That was why slaughter intent, which surpassed the heaven rank, was so terrifying. It wasn't just sword intent and slaughter intent. So long as any type of intent surpassed the heaven rank, then it would possess extremely terrifying might. Gu Qianfan had an extremely solemn expression on his face as well. While he was very strong, he didn't dare underestimate intents that had surpassed the heaven rank. Gu Qianfan's eyes narrowed as he watched red light continue surging out incessantly from within Yang Yi, while the slaughter intent Yang Yi emanated grew ceaselessly stronger, and then a ferocious glow flashed through his eyes. He remained silent for a moment before suddenly stomping his right foot against the ground, and his figure transformed into a ray of light that shot towards Yang Yi. Shang Qingying and the others were horrified, and it was too late to stop him by the time they recovered from their shock, because Gu Qianfan was already in front of Yang Yi. At the same time, his spear carried terrifying force as it stabbed towards Yang Yi's head. The might of this attack was extremely terrifying, and even the space around it was blasted into pieces. This caused the spear to seem like an approaching black hole, and it was extremely astonishing. Besides that, the spear even carried peak second-level heaven rank spear intent. As soon as that formidable spear intent appeared, the space around Yang Yi actually started to warp under its influence. Feng Wuxiao and the others were horrified when they witnessed this scene, but they were powerless to do anything. They could only watch as Gu Qianfan's spear grew closer and close to Yang Ye's head. Die! Gu Qianfan had a savage expression in his eyes, and he suddenly twisted the spear in his grasp. The spear instantly arrived before the center of Yang Ye's forehead. However, Yang Yi suddenly opened his eyes when it was just about to stab into him. In an instant, a ray of red light surged out from his eyes, and the spear started trembling violently. After that, everyone here watched as the spear actually warped, and it only took less than a breath of time for it to be twisted apart. At the same time, Gu Qianfan's peak second-level heaven rank spear intent had instantly vanished without a trace. Gu Qianfan was astounded and about to retreat. However, an invisible force suddenly pressed down upon him like a million mountains, and it almost suffocated him. In that very same instant, a red ray of light instantly enveloped him, and his eyes started to gradually turn red. Quasi-void rank slaughter intent and quasi-void rank sword intent. Two types of quasi-void rank intents. Many experts in the distance were stunned on the spot by this scene. Just a single quasi-void rank intent was extremely extraordinary, yet Yang Yi possessed two types of intents, and both of them were at the quasi-void rank. What did that represent? It represented that he didn't even have to lift a hand and could kill ordinary high-rank half-saints with just those two intents. Just like this very moment. Even though Gu Qianfan was a high-rank half-saint and wasn't even an ordinary one, he didn't even have the ability to fight back before two quasi-void rank intents. In the beginning, Gu Qianfan's eyes were still slightly clear, and he was struggling. He wanted to struggle free of Yang Ye's intense hold. However, it was in vain because his spear intent couldn't leave his body, let alone fight Yang Ye's slaughter intent and sword intent. It didn't take long for Gu Qianfan's eyes to grow redder and redder. In the end, the last trace of clarity in his eyes vanished. After that, a shocking scene occurred. Gu Qianfan suddenly withdrew a dagger and waved it, and his left arm flew into the air. After that, he waved the dagger swiftly, and his legs were severed. That wasn't the end of it. The others watched as Gu Qianfan started to slowly slice off his flesh, bit by bit, as if he was chopping himself into pieces. Yi Yang! Stop that! Quickly! Stop that now! Shang Qingying was horrified and charged hastily towards Gu Qianfan because she wanted to stop Yang Yi. However, Yang Yi suddenly gazed at her, and then a ray of red light shot out from his eyes and surged towards her. At the same time, an invisible force appeared in the surroundings and forcefully suppressed Shang Qingying. Shang Qingying and the other high-rank half-saints of the academy were horrified, and they hurriedly stood in front of Shang Qingying. One of the high-rank half-saints spoke quickly. "Instructor Yi, wake up quickly. Wake up quickly. We're on your side. We're on your side. Don't act rashly." Shang Qingying and the others turned pale when they felt the terrifying sword intent and slaughter intent which were pressing down onto them. Die! Yang Yi suddenly spoke before he transformed into a red ray of light that charged in the direction of Shang Qingying's group. "Instructor Yi, wake up quickly. We're on your fucking side. Just watch me. I swear that we're really on your side. Stop wasting your fucking breath on him. He has gone completely mad. Hurry up and run." At this moment, Yang Ye's mind wasn't clear at all. Slaughter intent could affect others, and it could affect its owner as well. If it was in the past, then it was impossible for his slaughter intent to affect him. Because it was only at the third level of the heaven rank, so he had his quasi-void rank sword intent to suppress it and prevent his slaughter intent from causing any trouble. Yet now, his slaughter intent had risen to the quasi-void rank, and it was on the same level as his sword intent. So, it was impossible to suppress his slaughter intent now. Coupled with what had happened to Yu Wushuang, Yang Ye's mind itself was filled with boundless resentment and the intent to kill. So, his slaughter intent had completely gained the upper hand and suppressed his sword intent. Since it had gained the upper hand, there was only the intent to slaughter and slaughter like a madman within his mind. Everyone here was horrified upon seeing Yang Yi in such a state. Even though Yang Yi was heavily injured, he was completely capable of suppressing them with just his quasi-void rank sword intent and quasi-void rank slaughter intent. Flee! That was the only thought left in their minds, and it was to flee as soon as possible. Countless people started flying madly out of the city, and it was truly quite a grand scene. For some unknown reason, Yang Yi had locked onto Shang Qingying, and rays of red light and invisible sword intent were pressing down madly towards her. Shang Qingying was horrified. She couldn't be bothered to pay attention to anything else, and she intended to flee as well. However, Yang Yi instantly appeared in front of her, and he'd even utilized the laws of speed. "I'm finished." This thought had just appeared in her mind when a red ray of light locked onto her, and then her eyes instantly turned crimson red. Moreover, she wasn't the only one. The eyes of a few dozen others behind her had turned crimson red as well. After that, all of them, including Shang Qingying, slowly raised their weapons and pushed them towards their own chests. "Stop! Yi Yang! Wu Shuang is still alive." Suddenly, Yu Wujiao's anxious voice resounded. As soon as it did, Shang Qingying and the others immediately stopped moving. However, it was still a little too late, and their weapons had stabbed into their bodies. Fortunately, it had merely pierced through their skin. Yang Ye's figure stiffened on the spot. A long time passed before he seemed to be visibly struggling, and then the red light around him started to gradually surge back into him. Just like that, around 15 minutes passed before the red light throughout the sky and the surroundings vanished. At the same time, Yang Ye's hair and eyes gradually returned to normal. Everyone here heaved sighs of relief when they witnessed this scene. Once Shang Qingying and the others regained consciousness, they immediately broke out in cold sweat. After all, they would have taken their own lives if Yu Wujiao was just a moment slower. Yang Yi stopped on the spot for a moment, and then his figure flashed over to Yu Wushuang. At this moment, Yu Wushuang was looking at him while lying in Yu Wujiao's arms, and her face was covered in tears. When he saw that she was still alive, Yang Ye's figure immediately slumped to the ground. Earlier, the reason he'd been able to move was actually because of his intent to kill and powerful will. Now, once he saw that Yu Wushuang was still alive, that willpower and intent to kill had dispersed without a trace, so his body couldn't hold on any longer. Shang Qingying heaved a huge sigh of relief when she saw Yang Yi crash to the ground. She realized that Yang Yi, who still had control over himself, was actually quite a nice person. Of course, the main reason was because Yang Yi was truly too terrifying once he lost his mind. She didn't doubt that if Yu Wushuang had really died, then Yang Yi would have definitely slaughtered everyone here like a madman. It wasn't that Yang Yi wanted to kill all of them, it was because he'd lost his mind. Yang Yi, who had control over his mind, still had some limits he wouldn't cross, and he wouldn't look for trouble with others if others didn't offend him. However, once he did lose his mind, he killed anyone and everyone in sight. Shang Qingying withdrew her gaze from Yang Yi, and then glanced at Gu Qianfan. At this moment, Gu Qianfan was still alive, but it was a fate more terrifying than death. His limbs were severed while his body was completely mangled, and his mangled body was twitching incessantly on the ground. Moreover, there were countless slices of flesh below him. Every single slice was extremely thin, and there were over 1,000 of them. At this moment, he was fully conscious, and he was staring fixedly at Yang Yi with a gaze filled with boundless resentment. A long time passed before he gazed at Shang Qingying, and there was a slightly pleading gaze in his eyes. At this moment, death was a form of release to him. A wisp of pity flashed through Shang Qingying's eyes, and a long time passed before she finally sighed and flicked with her finger. A strand of energy shot through the center of Gu Qianfan's forehead, and he perished on the spot. The secret court is truly gone. There was a complicated expression in her eyes. The secret court could be said to be a central force of the academy, and it wouldn't feel so bad to her if the secret court had been annihilated by the demon beasts. However, all the elites of the secret court had died at Yang Ye's hands. It would be a lie if she said that she wasn't angry. It wasn't just her. Even the saints of the academy definitely carried quite a bit of resentment. However, it was just as Yang Yi said. A living genius was always more important than dead geniuses. Moreover, if the academy wanted to wipe away the humiliation it had suffered from White Deer Academy, then it was obvious that Yang Yi was their best candidate, or he could be said to be their last suitable candidate. He was strong, possessed extraordinary natural talent, and was a ruthless and absolutely bold person who stopped at nothing to achieve his goals. Only his leadership would give the geniuses of the academy a chance to survive the competition in White Deer Academy and even gain a good rank in the competition. She was very clearly aware of what it meant to the academy to obtain a good rank in White Deer Academy's competition. It meant that it was very likely for the academy to return to the Central Divine Prefecture. If it could accomplish that, then not to mention losing the secret court, even losing 10 secret courts would still be a worthy price to pay. After all, once it could return to the Central Divine Prefecture, then it could immediately foster 10 times the elites that the secret court once had. After all, there were countless geniuses in the Central Divine Prefecture. In the end, the main reason why the academy had been able to tolerate Yang Yi until now was because it intended to use him. The academy couldn't be said to hold ill intent because there was no such thing as free food in this world. If one wanted to obtain something, then one had to pay the corresponding price. Moreover, wasn't Yang Yi using the academy as well? Regardless of which world it was, everything depended on benefits and interests. Ocean of Cloud City. Yang Yi laid on the bed in a room within his city while a faint violet glow permeated his body. Yu Wushuang and Yu Wujiao were by the side of his bed. Yu Wushuang was lying in Yu Wujiao's arms, and her countenance was still quite pale while she seemed to be very weak. "Little sister, you almost scared me to death." Yu Wujiao tightened her grasp on Yu Wushuang's hand and said, "Fortunately, father gave that piece of mirror armor to you. Otherwise you would have died. You damn little girl. Don't do something so stupid in the future, all right? Tell me, why did you even try to block it for him? Does he even need your help? His body is as terrifying as a demon beast, and he would be fine even if he suffered a few hits. Even if something did happen to him, what would that have to do with you? Have you thought about what I would do if you died? Have you thought about our eldest sister? Have you thought about our father?" As she spoke, Yu Wujiao's shoulders started to tremble, while tears rolled down her face. Yu Wushuang withdrew her gaze from Yang Yi and looked up at Yu Wujiao before she spoke softly. "Second sister, do you know how it feels to like someone?" Yu Wujiao immediately stopped crying. She seemed to have thought of something, and her expression changed. "Wushuang, you're still young. You're still so young. Don't think about all of that. I'm being serious. Don't scare your second sister." Yu Wushuang replied, "I'll be as old as you in a few years." Yu Wujiao was on the verge of crying again. "You can do as you like then, but you can't do that now. You're still too young." Yu Wushuang suddenly said, "It was you who told me to love and hate bravely." Yu Wujiao's face froze, and then she swiftly shook her head. "No, you're still too young." Yu Wushuang continued, "It was you who told me that I should step forward bravely if I encountered someone I liked, and if words don't suffice, then I should use force. If force fails, then use persistence. My great sister, I was mistaken, all right? Your second sister was full of nonsense in the past. In short, you're not allowed to. You can do as you please once you're older, but you're not allowed to think about all of that right now." Yu Wujiao was on the verge of crying. Yu Wushuang's eyes carried a trace of disdain. "I asked you what it felt like to have feelings for someone, and I never said I was going to do anything. Second sister, your thoughts aren't healthy." Yu Wujiao laughed bitterly, and then she spoke seriously. "Wushuang, love is something that carries thorns. I know you're very smart, but your wisdom isn't enough when it comes to love. Listen to your second sister. Yang Yi isn't someone who's from the same world as we are. The time will come when he leaves you far behind. At that time, it'll be very painful for you. Moreover, you're still young now, so he probably only treats you as his younger sister. It's utterly impossible for a relationship between man and woman to form between the two of you." Yu Wushuang's eyes dimmed down when she heard what Yu Wujiao said at the end, because she knew that Yu Wujiao was right. Indeed, Yang Yi had always treated her like his younger sister. A long time passed before Yu Wushuang glanced at Yang Yi with a complicated expression in her eyes, and she spoke softly. "The heavens are truly cruel to me. It made me encounter the right person at the wrong time." Yu Wujiao was at a loss for words. Time trickled by. 2 hours later, Yang Yi suddenly opened his eyes, and a mouthful of foul air escaped his lips. My injuries aren't a problem. But my lifespan. Half a year. Yang Yi couldn't help but frown when he thought of his lifespan. Needless to say, attaining the half-saint realm in half a year was very difficult even for him. Meanwhile, Yu Wushuang spoke abruptly. You're awake. Yu Wujiao gazed at Yang Yi as well, and her gaze was quite hostile. Yang Yi restrained his thoughts and gazed at Yu Wushuang. He was about to speak when the door to the room was suddenly pushed open, and then Hao Shuaibo ran into the room. Young Miss Wushuang. There's trouble. The city is in chaos again. Those fellows are actually fighting and killing each other for the sake of seizing the corpses and inner cores of the dead demon beasts outside the city. Even the experts of the academy can't stop them. The greed of man. Yu Wushuang shook her head, and then she said, Notify the city. Tell them that Yi Yang is awake. Outside the northern city gates. The crowd outside the city was in chaos, and shrill cries resounded incessantly. The wolf army had retreated in defeat, and they'd left the corpses of over 2 million demon beasts behind. These corpses were treasures to all humans. Especially the inner cores of those demon beasts, it was definitely a treasure to the human race. After all, it could improve their strength and could be sold at high prices. The corpses of over 2 million demon beasts represented that there were over 2 million inner cores here. Moreover, most of them were at the Exalt realm, Monarch realm, and even the Half-Saint realm. There were even some high-rank half-saints. The temptation of obtaining such inner cores caused the selfish desire of the united human army to appear once more. In the end, they weren't able to distribute it evenly, and so they started fighting. Shang Qingying and the others were at a loss for what to do while they watched the members of the crowd fight each other. The academy had even stepped forward to stop all of it, but it was completely useless. It would be fine if all of them were the academy's enemies because they could just deal with them by force. However, the problem was that these human cultivators weren't their enemies, so it was impossible to resolve the matter by force. The academy had even stepped forward to stop a few people, but it wasn't effective at all. Because everyone here was participating in the fighting for the inner cores. If they were to use their strengths to stop the crowd, then it might cause the members of the crowd to feel displeased and even rise up in revolt. Meanwhile, an old man by Shang Qingying's side said, It wouldn't be like this if Yi Yang was here. Shang Qingying glanced at the old man and said, Elder Yu, didn't you really hate him? The old man shook his head. He acts recklessly and without restraint, and he isn't able to be flexible as well. Moreover, he attacks at the slightest sign of conflict. I really do hate such a character. However, I have to admit that only a person like him can deter all of them. Shang Qingying remained silent for a long time, and then she said, I don't know if his presence in our academy is a blessing or a calamity. In any case, he'll definitely cause huge trouble for the academy in the future. The old man nodded and said, With his character, he'll either charge all the way until the end and grow to state that everyone has to look up to, or he'll perish somehow. When he spoke up to this point, the old man suddenly gazed at Shang Qingying and spoke seriously. Little girl, it's best if you try your best not to offend that madman. Just like that other little girl said earlier, he has wanted to kill you on many occasions. If he uses his full strength, then unless the dean or the other old fellows are here, otherwise no one in the academy would be able to stop him. Shang Qingying was about to say something when a huge explosion resounded from afar, and then a furious roar resounded. This half-saint's inner core belongs to me. I'll kill anyone who fights me for it. Shang Qingying and the others looked towards the source of the voice, and they saw a man who held a huge saber was surrounded by a group of people. There were even a few corpses at the man's feet. The man with the huge saber was a half-saint, and the people around him were mostly at the monarch realm, while there were a few half-saints amongst them. However, they seemed to fear the man's strength, so they merely surrounded him, but no one dared to be the first to attack. It's yours? Su Man? Who do you think you are? The inner core of a half-saint belongs to those with the strength to possess it. If you're sensible, then put it down. Otherwise, today will be the day you die. A thin, middle-aged man in the group spoke in a gloomy voice. It belongs to those with the strength to possess it? The man called Su Man spat on the ground and pointed a finger at the thin man. You Qing, trash like you dares to speak such words? Do you even dare to fight me one-on-one? The eyelids of the man called Yu Qing twitched, and then he spoke gloomily. Su Man, I think you want to die. Don't even think that I would fucking fear all of you just because you have a huge number of people on your side. Su Man laughed fiercely. Yes, I can't defeat all of you by myself, but I guarantee that I'll be able to drag down at least 90% of you. If I can't, then I'll detonate myself and blast all of you into bits. Their expressions changed slightly upon hearing Su Man. After all, the self-detonation of a half-saint was no laughing matter. So, some of the monarch realm cultivators even started to arouse the intent to leave. After all, they would absolutely perish if a half-saint detonated himself. What fucking nonsense! Would he even dare to do that? Meanwhile, Yu Qing spoke furiously. He's just trying to scare us. We have so many on our side, so why should we even fear him? Attack him together. Fuck you. I'll kill you first, you fucking bastard. Su Man roared furiously, and he was about to attack. However, a voice suddenly resounded. Yi Yang is here. It wasn't very loud, but everyone here stopped what they were doing. Su Man was beyond furious, so he'd forgotten who Yi Yang was, and he immediately spoke furiously. Not to mention Yi Yang. Even if the dean of the academy comes here, I'll still. He suddenly shut his mouth when he spoke up to this point. At this moment, he seemed to have recalled who Yi Yang was. Everyone looked towards the city gates, and a man and two women were standing below the city gate, which was only half intact right now. It was naturally Yang Yi, Yu Wushuang, and Yu Wujiao. Yang Yi and Yu Wushuang still seemed quite weak. Especially Yang Yi, it wasn't just his body which seemed weak, even his aura was weak. Even then, everyone here had stopped what they were doing. Yang Yi coughed lightly, and then he walked towards Su Man and the others. The others in Yang Ye's path immediately moved aside, and they even hastily started nodding and greeting him. It didn't take long for Yang Yi to arrive before Su Man and the others. He glanced at them before his gaze descended onto Su Man in the end, and he said, "Give it to me." Everyone gazed at Su Man when they heard him, and they revealed a variety of expressions. Most of them took pleasure in Su Man's misfortune, especially those fellows who'd surrounded Su Man. Su Man's expression changed slightly when he heard Yang Yi. Obviously, he hadn't expected that this god of death would look for trouble with him. He pondered deeply for quite some time before he said, I obtained this inner core from a half-saint realm demon beast that I killed. It should be mine. I said give it to me. Yang Yi looked Su Man in the eyes, and his voice was very calm. However, the atmosphere here became tense instead. Su Man's expression became unsightly. He struggled inwardly for a long time before he finally tossed it towards Yang Yi. A jade white pearl flew over to Yang Yi while Su Man turned around with the intention to leave. However, Yang Yi suddenly said, Wait! Su Man turned to look at Yang Yi with a gloomy expression on his face while flames of rage burned in his eyes. May I know if Instructor Yi has any further instructions? Yang Yi didn't answer him, and he gazed at Shang Qingying instead. Does the academy have something like a technique pavilion? Shang Qingying was slightly stunned, but she still nodded and replied, It has a combat technique department, and it's filled with techniques. Not only are there Dao rank techniques there are Saint rank and even Divine rank techniques there. Yang Yi nodded slightly, and then he gazed at Su Man. You can head to the combat technique department and choose any technique below the Divine rank. Of course, you can only memorize it and not take it out of the department. Everyone here was stunned by Yang Ye's words, and it included Su Man, Shang Qingying, and the others. A long time passed before Su Man gulped and said, Are you telling the truth? Yang Yi nodded. Of course. Su Man asked, Can you make that decision? Yang Yi said, Didn't you hear the dean? Everyone in the academy has to obey my commands now. So I naturally can. Right, Instructor Shang? He gazed at Shang Qingying as he finished speaking. Shang Qingying's eyelids twitched. She naturally knew that the dean didn't mean that at all. However, she'd still nodded in the end, because she knew that Yang Yi definitely had a reason for doing that. Clamorous noise resounded throughout the surroundings when they saw Shang Qingying nod. The Combat Technique Department of the Ocean of Clouds Academy was extremely famous throughout Pine Prefecture, because even the techniques of Sky Divine Hall and the Endless Devil Sect couldn't compete with the techniques it contained. After all, many of its techniques had been brought over from the Central Divine Prefecture by the Dean and the others. Just as Shang Qingying said, it didn't just possess saint rank techniques. There were even some divine rank techniques that were legendary existences in the prefecture. Now, Su Man could actually head there and choose a technique, so the eyes of countless people had instantly turned red with envy. Su Man was beyond excited as well. However, he didn't allow the excitement to overwhelm him, and he immediately suppressed the joy and excitement he felt and asked, "Why?" Everyone gazed at Yang Yi as they wanted to know why as well. Yang Yi gazed at the inner core in his grasp and said, "These demon beasts are your enemies, and they are the enemies of my Ocean of Clouds Academy as well. From this moment onwards, I promise that the 30 people who kill the most demon beasts will be allowed to enter my Academy's Combat Technique Department, or even the Cultivation Technique Department or Treasure Department, and you can choose a treasure below the divine rank. As for those below the top 30 and within the top 1,000, all of you'll be able to obtain a treasure below the saint rank. As for those below the top 1,000 and in the top 10,000, you can choose any treasure below the Dao rank." Yang Yi paused for a moment when he spoke up to this point, and then he said, "Besides that, my academy won't take a single one of the corpses and inner cores of the demon beasts here. However, it has to be distributed by my academy. I guarantee that we'll try our best to distribute it equally. As for the corpses and inner cores obtained in the future, they'll belong to the one who killed that demon beast." The crowd seethed with excitement upon hearing Yang Yi. Entering the Combat Technique Department, Cultivation Technique Department, or Treasure Department of the Academy was something which was impossible to them. After all, it was extremely difficult for even the members of the Academy to enter those departments. Yet now all of them would have the chance. Moreover, they would be able to keep the corpses and inner cores of the demon beasts they killed. They felt their blood start to boil, and some even started looking towards the mountain range and seemed to wish for nothing more than to attack it. Shang Qingying's beautiful brows were knit tightly together, and she'd intended to speak numerous times but had restrained herself in the end. Suddenly, a middle-aged man stepped forward and asked in a deep voice, "Instructor Yi, is everything you said true?" He was a high-rank half-saint. Obviously, even high-rank half-saints couldn't resist such temptation. After all, saint-rank techniques or treasures were truly too rare. Yang Yi answered, "I'm a man of my word." The middle-aged man took a deep breath upon hearing Yang Yi, and then he cupped his hands and said, "My name is Lu Shanhe, and I'll obey Instructor Ye's every command for the next month. I'm Feng Xiangdong, and I'm willing to obey Instructor Ye's every command for the next month. It didn't take long for huge amounts of people to make their stand known to Yang Yi, and they indicated that they were willing to obey Yang Yi. If these fellows had defended the city earlier because they'd been forced to and had no other choice, then they were completely willing now. Yang Yi shot his gaze towards the mountain range in the distance, and a long time passed before he let out a mouthful of air and said, "It's time for us to counterattack." In the room, Yu Wushuang spoke slowly, 32 high-rank half-saints, 150 mid-rank half-saints, and over 230 ordinary half-saints. As for the cultivators below the half-saint realm, there are around 200,000 at the monarch realm and over 3 million at the exalt realm. The rest are at the spirit realm and king realm. There was a deck chair not too far away from her, and Yang Yi, who was lying on it, opened his eyes slowly. "What about the experts of the academy?" She replied, "The academy has 10 high-rank half-saints, 100 mid-rank half-saints, and over 200 ordinary half-saints. The rest are the army of the city and the students of the outer court. The army of the city can be considered to be a force that's directly subordinate to the academy, and its strength isn't bad." Yu Wushuang paused for a moment when she spoke up to hear, and then she continued, "All in all, our strength should be superior to Welkin Wolf Mountain Range. However, we might not be able to defeat their army in actual battle." Yang Yi was puzzled, Why? She explained. While we have a huge number of experts and most of their strengths aren't bad, they are independent cultivators in the end. Moreover, many of them have quite a bit of enmity between each other. So, they'll scheme against each other, and it's absolutely impossible for them to truly work together. However, the wolf army is different. They would even give their lives away if the Welkin Wolf Demon King ordered it. Besides that, the mountain range is their lair, so they are familiar with every single corner of it. But we aren't very familiar with the terrain there, so we'll be disadvantaged once we enter the mountain range. Another problem is that we'll definitely have to split up upon entering the mountain range, and that's even more disadvantageous to us. Because the strength of human cultivators is usually weaker than demon beasts, and there are numerous dangerous places throughout the mountain range like swamps, poison gas, and so on and so forth. So, it's not impossible to launch a counterattack, it's just extremely difficult, and the slightest mistake might cause us to suffer a huge blow. Yang Yi pondered deeply for a long time and said, "You're right. However, you should realize that the situation will get worse if we just adopt a passive stance and continue defending the city, especially when the city has been breached. If the demon beasts are allowed to recuperate and stage a comeback, then we'll suffer an even greater disadvantage. Moreover, the demon beasts have retreated. So many people and powers throughout the city have definitely started to become eager to act. However, you're right, it really isn't a good idea to launch a counterattack right now. Alas, it's such a headache." Yang Yi had a huge headache when it came to things like this, because he was never one to scheme and plot. He liked to just use his fists, fight if he could win and run if he couldn't. It was just that simple. Now, making him manage the overall situation and devise a strategy was a huge problem to him. Yu Wushuang grinned and said, "Actually, the situation isn't bad at all. At the very least, we've succeeded at gathering the strength of everyone within the city. Moreover, the temptation of the compensation you promised has caused many to be unwilling to leave even if we try to drive them away. The important matter at hand isn't to counterattack but to make arrangements for all the residents of the city, including organizing all the experts properly so they don't fight like a bunch of disbanded soldiers." Yang Yi nodded. "You deal with that. I'll tell the experts of the academy to work together with you." Yu Wushuang nodded slightly, and then she suddenly seemed to have thought of something and frowned a little. "Logically speaking, the experts of the ancient sword school should be here by now. However, there's still no sign of them. I suspect that they might have encountered some sort of trouble." Yang Ye's brows knit together slightly. "Send someone to investigate. Right, investigate Sky Divine Hall as well. They haven't made a move until now, and that's truly quite unusual." She nodded and replied, "Just rest at ease and recuperate. I'll manage the city's affairs well. Presently, the dean and the others aren't here, so you're our pillar of support. Thus, you must recover as soon as possible. Only then can you strengthen their morale and confidence." As soon as she finished speaking, Yu Wushuang left. Yang Yi fell into deep thought once she left. His strength could be said to have risen greatly. Not only had his cultivation risen to the high rank of the monarch realm, he'd even attained the quasi-void rank in slaughter intent. With 2 quasi-void rank intents at his disposal, he could be said to be capable of killing high-rank half-saints with ease. However, Yang Yi was clearly aware that it was far from sufficient. How strong was the gold-robed man? Very strong. Even though he'd killed the gold-robed man, he'd paid a horrible price for his success. However, the gold-robed man's strength was definitely still slightly inferior to Lu Qianxiao, Lu Wan'er, and the others. After all, even if he hadn't witnessed Lu Qianxiao's strength, he'd witnessed Lu Wan'er and Qing Daofu's strength. He had no doubt that Lu Wan'er's strength was superior to the gold-robed man, because Lu Wan'er's sword soul technique ignored all defenses. As for Qing Daofu, while Yang Yi had merely exchanged a single blow with him that day, Yang Yi was able to sense how strong Qing Daofu was. No matter if it was Lu Wan'er or Qing Daofu, both of them felt very dangerous to him, and they even felt unfathomable to him. Of course, he didn't fear Lu Wan'er and the other 4 top geniuses of the prefecture, but he refused to underestimate anyone. "I must attain the half-saint realm as soon as possible," Yang Yi decided in his heart. Presently, he didn't have much lifespan left, and only by accomplishing a breakthrough in his cultivation could he obtain more. Besides that, he had to attain the half-saint realm to realize a qualitative improvement in his strength. Not only would his sword domain improve upon attaining the half-saint realm, his body would be strengthened greatly as well. After all, he'd cultivated the 9 rebirth technique. Of course, he had something even more important to do right now. Xianxia restrained his thoughts and waved his right hand. The gold-robed man's corpse appeared in front of him. He'd very rarely created sword servants since arriving at the Radiance dimension because there weren't many who possessed strength which he approved of. Now he'd encountered 2. One was the gold-robed man, and the other was Yu Wuing. He hadn't summoned Yu Wuing to help him kill the gold-robed man because he wanted to kill the gold-robed man on his own. After all, doing so could improve the morale of the city's forces, and it could strengthen the human army's confidence. Besides that, he didn't want to reveal Yu Wuing and his ability to create puppets. If he used Yu Wuing well, then he could take his enemies by surprise. After all, the laws of darkness was extremely mysterious, and an ordinary person couldn't resist it at all. Just like that, time trickled by, and around 4 hours passed before the gold-robed man started to move again. He walked over to Xianxia's side, and then knelt down on one knee. "Master!" Xianxia took a deep breath while sweat covered his forehead. He noticed that the fewer formidable experts he transformed into sword servants, the more it exhausted his mind and energy. Fortunately, both Yu Wuing and the gold-robed man were weaker to him. So, while it was quite exhausting, that was all it was. Xianxia regulated his breathing for a while, and then he gazed at the gold-robed man. "Can you transform back to your original form?" The gold-robed man nodded, and then he instantly transformed into a gold wolf that was covered in golden scales. At this moment, the golden wolf was much smaller than before, and it was like the size of a normal wolf. But even though it was small, it emanated a terrifying aura, and the ferocious glow in its golden eyes simply made it seem like it was ready to devour its prey. Xianxia gazed at the golden wolf before drawing his sword and striking the wolf's head. Hiss! A string of sparks sprayed from the point of collision, but the golden wolf was completely unharmed. It hadn't even left a mark on the golden wolf. Moreover, the Dao rank sword in Xianxia's grasp was covered in cracks. What powerful defenses! Xianxia had a solemn expression in his eyes. His sword had been enhanced by 3rd-level heaven rank sword intent and slaughter intent. However, he was still unable to pierce through its defenses. If he fought me in such a state just now, then I'm afraid even my quasi-void rank sword intent wouldn't have been able to kill him with just a single strike. The defenses of the golden wolf standing before him could be described as being the most terrifying defenses he'd ever seen, and even he was far inferior to it. It could be said that if he hadn't relied on the laws of speed to completely overwhelm the gold-robed man with his speed, then even his quasi-void rank sword intent might have been incapable of killing the gold-robed man, and it might have even ended in his own death instead. After all, he'd relied on his quasi-void rank sword intent to pierce through the gold-robed man's defenses. However, the gold-robed man could break through his defenses with ease. However, as it stands now, it was better for Xianxia the more terrifying the golden wolf was. Moreover, the gold wolf was the Welkin Wolf Demon King's son. So he possessed an extremely high status in Welkin Wolf Mountain Range. He could use that status to accomplish many things. Xianxia placed the golden wolf and Yu Wuing within the ancient sheath, and then his gaze descended onto the ancient sheath. There was a trace of bewilderment in his eyes as he gazed at it, because he possessed primordial violet energy now, and its restorative effects should have allowed the sword spirit to wake up by now. However, the sword spirit showed no signs of waking up at all, and Xianxia couldn't help but feel quite worried by that. "I'm sorry." A strand of guilt arose in Xianxia's heart as he gazed at the ancient sheath, because the sword spirit could be said to have fallen into such deep sleep because of him. If he was strong enough, then executing the true form of Heavenrend wouldn't have been a problem. However, he wasn't strong enough and had executed it by force, so it hadn't just harmed him, it had harmed the sword spirit as well. A long time passed before Xianxia sighed softly and put the ancient sheath away. Presently, it was pointless no matter how much he blamed himself, and instead of doing that, It was better to work hard on becoming stronger so that he wouldn't have to rely on the strength of others in the future. Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment, and then he flipped his palm, and the unfettered one's painting which the dean gave him appeared before him. As he gazed at it, Yang Yi couldn't help but become immersed within it. Just like that, 3 days and 3 nights passed. At dawn on the 4th day, Yu Wushuang suddenly walked into his room, and she spoke seriously. The 3,000+ experts of the ancient sword school who were coming to help us are in trouble. Yang Yi immediately opened his eyes when he heard her, and his gaze was calm like the surface of a lake. However, the space before his eyes was instantly split apart. Yu Wushuang was shocked speechless by the scene before her eyes, and it took her quite some time to recover. You attained void rank sword intent. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly, and the space before him instantly returned to normal once his eyes were fully closed. A short while passed before Yang Yi opened his eyes again, and it was normal this time. He shook his head and said, "How could it be that easy to attain? I merely gained some comprehension and strengthened my sword intent by quite a bit. Right, you know about void rank sword intent?" Yu Wushuang nodded. "I heard about it from my father." Yang Yi asked, "Your father is a saint?" She replied, "Of course. Right? He's best friends with your master, Taoist Gu." Yang Yi said, "I'll definitely pay him a visit if I have the chance." Right, something happened to the disciples of the ancient sword school. Yu Wushuang answered, "Let him tell you." As soon as she finished speaking, a one-armed man who wore green clothes and carried a sword chest on his back walked into the room. "Senior Brother Wu?" Yang Yi was quite surprised because the man was the slow sword Wu Yanzhong. Moreover, Yang Yi noticed that Wu Yanzhong's aura was very weak while numerous blade injuries of various sizes covered his body. Obviously, he was injured. "We have a problem." Wu Yanzhong revealed a gloomy expression on his face. It didn't take long for Wu Yanzhong to explain the sequence of events to Yang Yi. After they received his request for help, the disciples of the ancient sword school who were at the monarch realm had immediately rushed towards Ocean of Cloud City, and there were over 3,000 of them. Normally, they would have been able to arrive at the city a few days ago. However, they were ambushed by a group of black-clothed men of unknown origin while they were on their way to the city. They were caught off guard, and a few hundred of them perished in an instant. The disciples of the ancient sword school immediately launched a counterattack, but they noticed to their astonishment that those black-clothed men were truly formidable, and they lost even more of their companions after an intense battle with the black-clothed men. In the end, if they hadn't relied on the advantage in speed they possessed when flying on their swords, they would have probably been annihilated there. Yang Yi gazed at Wu Yanzhong and asked, "You're saying that there were only 13 of them?" Wu Yanzhong's face was quite unsightly, but he nodded with great difficulty in the end. Yang Yi asked, "All of them were just ordinary half-saints?" Wu Yanzhong's face wasn't unsightly now. It was completely dark. A long time passed before he laughed bitterly and said, "Brother Yang, please stop asking about them. I wouldn't know where to put my face if you do." Yang Yi and Yu Wushuang had solemn expressions on their faces when they heard him. The disciples of the ancient sword school who'd come this time were the elites of the sect. Even though most of them were at the monarch realm, they were existences who could surmount their realms of cultivation to kill their opponents. Ordinary half-saints and monarchs weren't really different in the eyes of those elites from the ancient sword school. Moreover, there were over 50 half-saints in the group. Over 50 half-saints and around 3,000 monarchs had actually been forced to flee for their lives when facing just 13 experts. Of course, Yang Yi had no intention of looking down on the disciples of the ancient sword school, because he was very clearly aware that if they could fight those 13 black-clothed men, then the disciples of the sword school would have definitely not fled. Since they'd chosen to flee, then it proved that those 13 black-clothed men weren't existences that they could defeat. Fighting an enemy to the death while being clearly aware that the gap between their strengths was huge couldn't be considered as bravery. It was stupidity. They are really strong. Meanwhile, Wu Yanzhong suddenly said, "Besides senior sister Lu, senior brother Qindong, and you, no one else below the Saint realm throughout our ancient sword school is capable of being a match for any one of them. Unfortunately, both senior brother Qindong and senior sister Lu hadn't come with us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have fallen into such an embarrassing situation. Yang Yi asked, "Where are the disciples of our sword school now?" "Outside the mountain range." Wu Yanzhong spoke in a low voice. As soon as we arrived at the outer area of the mountain range, we noticed that the sky of the entire mountain range is covered by a powerful restriction, so we couldn't fly at all and had no choice but to walk. After we entered the mountain range, we weren't just pursued by those 12 people, we were even besieged by the wolves of Welkin Wolf Mountain Range. I seized the opportunity created by the chaos and was protected by our other brothers in order to escape and rush to the city. When he spoke up to this point, he took a step forward and said, "Brother Yang, please act immediately. If you're too late, then I can only imagine how many brothers we would lose." Yang Yi gazed at Yu Wushuang and said, "Don't tell anyone that I left the city. Just say that I'm in closed-door cultivation if anyone asks." "I understand." Yu Wushuang nodded. "Be careful." She didn't stop Yang Yi. Even though those 13 black-clothed men were definitely extremely strong, she was confident in Yang Yi. If Yang Yi intended to flee, then unless he was pursued by a saint, even Lu Qianxiao and the other 4 top geniuses of the prefecture could only watch as he escaped. After all, Yang Yi had comprehended the laws of speed. Yang Yi nodded, and then he withdrew his gaze and looked at Wu Yanzhong. "Lead the way." Just like that, Yang Yi and Wu Yanzhong left the city in secret, and they dashed towards the mountain range. Yang Ye's brows suddenly knit tightly together when he entered the forest, and he stopped abruptly upon arriving at an empty plain. Wu Yanzhong asked with bewilderment, "Brother Yang, what's wrong?" Yang Yi spoke solemnly. "Leave." Wu Yanzhong's expression changed slightly. He was no fool, so he naturally knew that they were in trouble. "I never expected that another genius besides Lu Wanner has appeared in the ancient sword school." A voice resounded abruptly, and then 13 black-clothed figures suddenly appeared here and surrounded both Yang Yi and Wu Yanzhong. Besides the 13 black-clothed figures, Yang Yi saw one more person, and it was that man who wore a ghost mask. Yang Yi seemed to have realized something when he saw the man who wore the ghost mask. Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment, and then his gaze descended onto the black-clothed figures. They were extremely mysterious because they were floating, and their bodies seemed indistinct like souls. Most importantly, Yang Yi couldn't sense their auras at all. "It's them." Wu Yanzhong immediately revealed a solemn expression when he saw them. Yang Yi said, "Looks like killing the disciples of the ancient sword school wasn't your Sky Divine Hall's true motive. Your true objective was me." Wu Yanzhong's face turned slightly pale when he heard Yang Yi. At this moment, how could he not realize that their true objective wasn't the disciples of the sword school, and they'd only ambushed the disciples of the ancient sword school to draw Yang Yi out of the city? As for why he was able to escape and flee to the city, it was probably because they'd allowed him to. Wu Yanzhong gazed at Yang Yi and spoke bitterly. "I'm sorry." Yang Yi shook his head and said, "It's I who should say sorry. All of you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me. Alright, I don't like to waste my breath or be sentimental. Since we're from the same sect, then we should live and die together, right?" Wu Yanzhong nodded. "Indeed." Yang Yi Yang. "Haha, I never expected that you're that Yang Yi who challenged the Tao Order. I truly never expected you to come to the Ocean of Clouds Academy to be an instructor." The man wearing the ghost mask said, "The ancient sword school first had Lu Wanner, and not it has you as well. Looks like it's going to rise up in the world. Unfortunately, they won't have the chance to succeed. Because you're going to die. You just can't stop spouting nonsense." As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of light flashed and instantly arrived before the man wearing a ghost mask. However, one of the black-clothed men suddenly appeared in front of the masked man. The black-clothed man waved his right hand, and a black vortex appeared out of thin air before soundlessly sucking away Yang Ye's sword energy in an instant. The masked man laughed coldly. "Yang Yi, no matter how strong you are, you'll definitely die today. Do you know who they are? They are the 13 shadows of the Nether Pavilion in the Central Divine Prefecture. Even though they're only half-saints, Their joint strength is boundlessly close to that of a saint. Not to mention you, even Lu Wanner would definitely perish before them. The Nether Pavilion. Yang Ye's pupils constricted slightly when he heard that name. The Nether Pavilion was naturally not unfamiliar to him, because Nether Maiden said that she was from the Nether Pavilion. Even though he didn't know why the Nether Pavilion was in the Radiant Dimension while Nether Maiden was on Profounder Continent, he had no doubt that it was definitely an extremely terrifying existence. Nether Maiden had proved that, and these black-clothed men had proved that as well. Suddenly, the black-clothed man who led the group spoke abruptly. "Where's you wooing? You wooing?" Yang Yi frowned a little. He hadn't expected them to ask about her whereabouts. Meanwhile, the masked man suddenly said, "Yang Yi, Consort Yu is the reincarnation of the Nether Pavilion's Shadow Maiden. They came to Pine Prefecture in order to take her back. So, quickly hand her over and end your own life. Otherwise, even death would be difficult for you." Yang Yi paid no attention to the masked man. He gazed at the black-clothed man who led the group. "Do you know Nether Maiden?" "Her Highness, Nether Maiden." The black-clothed man who led the group spoke with slight surprise. "Why do you know her name?" "So she's fine." Yang Yi heaved a slight sigh of relief. Meanwhile, the black-clothed man suddenly spoke solemnly. "Tell me why you know her name. We can be considered to be friends." Yang Yi spoke the truth. He wasn't lying because they really were friends. "How dare you?" the black-clothed man roared. "Are you even worthy of being Her Highness' friend? How laughable. I don't want to waste my breath on you. Quickly hand over Her Highness, the Shadow Maiden. Otherwise, I'll obliterate you right now." Yang Ye's face fell. "Brother Wu, leave and lead the members of our sword school to the city." Wu Yanzhong wanted to say something, but Yang Yi looked him in the eyes and said, "You'll only be a burden to me." Wu Yanzhong's face froze. Quite some time passed before he spoke bitterly. "It's not nice to be so frank." As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of light that shot towards the distance. The black-clothed men were about to attack, but Yang Yi suddenly said, "Don't you want to know where your Shadow Maiden is?" The masked man suddenly said, "He can't be allowed to leave." The black-clothed man who led the group suddenly turned to look at the masked man. "Are you giving me an order?" The masked man's figure shook slightly, and he hurriedly said, "I dare not." "But—" "There are no buts." The black-clothed man said, "Even though we agreed to help your Sky Divine Hell eliminate Yang Yi in exchange for taking Her Highness, Shadow Maiden, back with us, we didn't agree to help you kill anyone else." The masked man was at a loss for words. Yang Yi suddenly said, "I don't believe that. All of you would kill me regardless of whether I tell you where she is. Right?" The black-clothed man, "That's not wrong." Yang Yi said, "I refuse to accept that. But what can you do?" The black-clothed man spoke with disdain. "In my opinion, you, Yang Yi, are an ant.